Dr. Park Hana's hands trembled as she reviewed the data flowing across her screens. The midnight air in the observation bunker felt heavy, punctuated only by the soft beeping of monitoring equipment and the occasional sip of cold coffee. For 3 years, she had dedicated her life to Earth's deep space monitoring network, a global system of advanced telescopes and sensors designed to peer into the darkness beyond our solar system. Tonight, that dedication had revealed something terrifying. "These energy patterns can't be natural," she whispered, mostly to herself. The other night shift scientists had gone for a break, leaving her alone with the discovery. The readings showed massive energy fluctuations at the edge of the Kuiper belt, the kind that could only come from engines, big ones, hundreds of them. She triple-checked the calculations, hoping to find an error. There wasn't one. Dr. Park grabbed her tablet and rushed down the corridor to the secure elevator. Her security badge granted her access to the lowest level of the facility, where Director Kim Do-yun maintained his office even at this late hour. The Defense Initiative never truly slept. "Director Kim," she called out, knocking rapidly on his door. "I need to speak with you immediately." The door slid open, revealing a Spartan office where Director Kim sat reviewing reports. At 58, his hair had gone completely gray, but his eyes remained sharp and alert, even at 3 a.m. Dr. Park. "What's so urgent it couldn't wait until morning?" She placed her tablet on his desk, bringing up the 3D model of the energy signatures. "They're here, or rather, they're coming." Director Kim's expression didn't change as he studied the data, but his knuckles whitened as he gripped the edge of his desk. "How many?" "Based on energy outputs, at least 200 vessels, enormous ones. The smallest is roughly the size of our largest aircraft carrier." She swiped to the next screen. "And they've arranged themselves in a formation consistent with military operations." "This isn't exploration, sir. It's mobilization." The director stood up and walked to the wall-sized window overlooking the underground command center, where dozens of analysts monitored global security. For 7 years, he had led Earth's Unified Defense Initiative, a secret organization created after the discovery of alien microbes on Mars had confirmed we weren't alone in the universe. But microbes were one thing. An alien armada was something else entirely. "How long have they been watching us?" he asked quietly. "Based on signal degradation patterns and stellar drift calculations, they've maintained observation posts beyond Neptune for at least 30 years. Dr. Park brought up another image. "We found this when we looked deeper into the data archives, subtle gravitational anomalies that previous scientists dismissed as instrument errors." Director Kim pressed a button on his desk. "Assemble the emergency response team. Authorization code Theta 9. I want everyone here in 20 minutes. The next hour passed in a blur as Earth's top military officials and scientists crowded into the briefing room. Dr. Park presented her findings while trying to keep her voice steady. General Song pounded his fist on the table, demanding immediate military preparations. Professor Jin argued for attempted communication. The UN Secretary General, connected via secure video, looked increasingly pale. "Enough," Director Kim finally said, his quiet voice somehow cutting through the chaos. "Our options are limited but clear. We cannot match their technology. That much is obvious from the energy readings alone. If they wanted to destroy us, they could have done so already." He stood up, commanding the room with his presence rather than his volume. "But they haven't. They've been watching, learning, which means they're calculating something. Possibly weighing the costs of conquest against potential resistance. We should surrender immediately," suggested one diplomat. "Preserve what lives we can." Dr. Park shook her head. "With respect, that approach assumes they think like us. We have no reason to believe they do. For all we know, surrender might be interpreted as weakness deserving elimination." Director Kim nodded. "Dr. Park is right. We need to send a message that makes them reconsider any hostile intentions without appearing threatening ourselves." The debate continued until dawn, when finally a consensus emerged. Earth would acknowledge the alien presence and make its position clear. "We know you're there. We know you're powerful, but humanity will defend itself with everything it has." In her lab, Dr. Park worked with linguists and communication experts to craft the message. They included mathematical sequences to demonstrate intelligence, visual representations of human diversity, and carefully selected information about Earth's history, including humanity's remarkable ability to adapt to challenges and overcome seemingly impossible odds. "Should we include information about our nuclear capabilities?" asked a military advisor. "No," Dr. Park replied. "We're not threatening them. We're warning them. There's a difference." The final message included something the linguists insisted was universal: music. The haunting melody of a single cello playing Bach served as the backdrop to humanity's first deliberate communication with an advanced alien civilization. As night fell again, Director Kim and Dr. Park stood together in the transmission center as Earth's most powerful radio telescope aimed at the alien fleet. "Do you think they'll listen?" she asked, watching the signal strength indicators climb. Director Kim's weathered face showed the weight of the moment. "I don't know. But throughout human history, the most dangerous conflicts have often started with misunderstandings. At least now, whatever happens next, they can't say we didn't warn them." With the press of a button, humanity's message raced outward at the speed of light, a declaration not of war, but of existence. A plea not for mercy, but for respect. Earth's first and only warning to the stars had been sent. Now they could only wait for a response that would determine the fate of their world. Emperor Li's scaled fingers tapped impatiently against the armrest of his crystalline throne as the human transmission played for the 8th time. The holographic display floated in the center of the vast chamber, showing mathematical sequences, images of Earth's life forms, and the peculiar vibrations they called music. The strange, mournful sounds of what the translation matrix identified as a cello echoed off the polished black stone walls of the Imperial command vessel. "Enough," he finally said, his voice carrying the distinctive metallic resonance of the Karan species. The Emperor's ceremonial robes, woven from the luminescent fibers of conquered worlds, shifted as he stood, catching the light from the 3 artificial suns that illuminated the throne room. "These primitive creatures bore me." The transmission faded as Admiral Choi approached the throne and bowed deeply, the cybernetic implants along his spine glowing blue through his military uniform. "Your assessment, Majesty." Emperor Li's 4 eyes narrowed, the outer pair focusing on the tactical display, while the inner pair studied his admiral's expression. "They've detected our observation posts. Unfortunate but inevitable. Their technology advances more quickly than our models predicted. But still centuries behind ours," Admiral Choi added quickly. Around them, robotic attendants moved silently, their sensor arrays constantly scanning for the Emperor's needs or threats to his person. Their most advanced weapons use crude atomic fission. They've barely left their own moon. The Emperor turned toward the viewport where Earth hung like a blue jewel against the blackness of space, still weeks away at sublight speed. His empire stretched across 17 star systems and 200 planets. Each conquest had followed the same efficient pattern: observation, assessment, overwhelming demonstration of force, and then submission. Those who resisted were made examples of. Those who submitted became productive members of the empire. "What resources does this planet offer?" the Emperor asked, though he already knew the answer. The briefing had been thorough, as always. "Water in abundance," replied Admiral Choi. "Rare minerals, a breathable nitrogen-oxygen atmosphere, and the humans themselves, physically weaker than most sentient species, but their cognitive abilities show promise as a labor force." From the shadows of the chamber, General Yoon stepped forward. Unlike the others of the Imperial Council, who wore cybernetic enhancements proudly, Yoon had only what was necessary for battlefield command. His weathered face showed the scars of actual combat, rare among the upper echelons of Imperial leadership. "Permission to speak freely, Your Majesty?" he asked, his voice low and gravelly. The Emperor gestured with one clawed hand. "Proceed." "The psychological profile of these humans is unusual," General Yoon said, bringing up his own data displays. "They don't surrender easily even when facing certain defeat. Their history is marked by conflicts where numerically and technologically inferior forces continued fighting against overwhelming odds." On the display, images of human warfare flashed by. Ancient battles with primitive weapons, more recent conflicts with mechanical vehicles, scenes of destruction and resilience. They are adaptable, Yoon continued. They reverse engineer technology at rates that exceed standard models, and they collaborate effectively in crisis situations, despite their fractured political systems. Admiral Choi scoffed, his cybernetic eye glowing brighter with his irritation. All conquered species have warrior cultures, General. The Barathi were fierce, the Nuvians were cunning. All now serve the Empire. The Barathi and Nuvians followed. Predictable patterns, General Yoon countered. These humans do not. Their message was not just information, it was a warning. They expect conflict, and they're preparing for it. A low murmur spread through the Imperial Council members who had gathered at the edges of the throne room. Emperor Li silenced them with a glance. For a millennium, the Empire had expanded without meaningful resistance. The thought that these primitive beings might pose a challenge was almost amusing. "Show me their weapons," the Emperor commanded. Holographic display shifted to show Earth's military capabilities: nuclear missiles, aircraft carriers, fighter jets, satellite systems. Primitive by Imperial standards. Their most powerful weapons could be neutralized by standard shield technology. Their communications could be jammed by entry-level electronic warfare. Emperor Li walked through the holographic display, dispersing images of tanks and submarines with waves of his hand. "Is this what concerns you, General? These toys?" "Not their weapons, Your Majesty. Their nature." General Yoon brought up another display, brain scans and psychological profiles. "Most species we've encountered evolved either as pure predators or prey. Humans evolved as both. They can be cooperative or competitive, peaceful or violent depending on circumstances. Our predictive models struggle with such duality." Emperor Li waved away his concerns. "Unusual or not, their planet will be ours within a standard week. The conquest protocol remains unchanged." He turned to Admiral Choi. "Prepare the first wave. The standard approach: neutralize their global communications, disable their power systems, demonstrate force at key military installations. When their leaders witness true power, they will submit." As the council members departed to prepare for the invasion, Emperor Li returned to his throne. A small robotic orb floated near his head, projecting the final moments of the human transmission, the E. Strange music and a simple message in mathematical form that the translation matrix had decoded. "We know you are watching. We know you are powerful, but we will defend our home." The Emperor touched a control, freezing the image of Earth. 200 worlds had fallen before the Empire. What made these humans think they were special? Dismissing the thought, Emperor Li activated the ship-wide communication system. "Set course for Earth. Standard conquest protocol." The human warning changes nothing. Behind him, General Yoon lingered in the shadows, studying the tactical displays with growing concern. In his centuries of military service, he had learned to recognize patterns, and something about these humans didn't fit any pattern he knew. But orders were orders, and the conquest of Earth would proceed. As the massive Imperial fleet accelerated toward the blue planet, Earth's warning continued to echo, unheeded, through the empty throne room. The Imperial warships appeared without. Warning: massive shadows blotting out the sun as they descended through Earth's atmosphere. Each vessel stretched nearly 2 kilometers long, their hulls gleaming with an otherworldly metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Smaller craft swarmed around them like metallic insects, their engines emitting an eerie blue glow that burned through the clouds. People around the world stood frozen in streets and fields, on rooftops and beaches, their faces upturned in horror and awe as humanity's worst fears materialized in the skies above every major city. The alien ships hovered silently, menacingly for exactly 17 minutes, just long enough for every news channel to broadcast their arrival, for every social media platform to explode with images, for the cold reality of first contact to sink in. Then the demonstrations began. Over Beijing, a pencil-thin beam of energy lanced downward from the lead vessel, vaporizing the communications tower in a heartbeat. In Washington, D.C., invisible waves disabled the power grid, plunging the capital into darkness. Above Moscow, The aliens deployed sonic weapons that shattered windows for kilometers in every direction, without harming a single human. The message was clear. Resistance was futile. Admiral Choi watched with satisfaction from the bridge of the Imperial flagship, his cybernetic eye recording everything for the Emperor's archives. Around him, alien officers monitored their stations with the cold efficiency that had made the Empire the dominant force in this sector of the galaxy. "All planetary defense systems have been neutralized," reported his tactical officer, a slender being with translucent skin. "Their primitive radar and satellite networks are disabled. Their leaders are attempting to establish communication." Admiral Choi's mouth curled into what passed for a smile among his species. "Broadcast the terms of surrender on all frequencies. They have one planetary rotation to comply." "Compliance probability?" he asked his ship's artificial intelligence. "Based on all previous conquest data, 98.7% likelihood of surrender within designated time frame," the AI responded. "Preparing occupation protocols." Deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, Director Kim Do-yoon stood in Earth's most secure bunker, watching as monitors displayed the alien ships positioned around the globe. Around him, military commanders and political leaders argued frantically about how to respond. "We should surrender immediately," insisted one official. "You've seen what their weapons can do." "And become slaves," countered another. "Look at those ships. They didn't come all this way for a friendly visit." Director Kim raised his hand for silence. 3 months ago, we detected their approach and sent our warning. They chose to ignore it." His calm voice cut through the panic. "Fortunately, we've used that time wisely." He nodded to Dr. Park Hana, who stepped forward. The scientist looked exhausted. She hadn't slept more than 3 hours a night since discovering the alien fleet. "When we detected their observation posts beyond Neptune last year, we recovered fragments of their technology," she explained, bringing up images on the main screen. "Specifically, we found components of a damaged scout ship. While we couldn't understand much of it, we were able to identify certain elements that interact with nuclear energy in unexpected ways." Director Kim pressed a button on the console. "Operation Thunderbolt is ready. All units in position." Around the world, in hidden silos and submarine launch bays, specially modified weapons waited. Not Earth's entire nuclear arsenal, they weren't that foolish, but a carefully selected array of missiles, each one retrofitted with components reverse-engineered from the alien technology. "We don't know if this will work," Dr. Park warned. "The modifications are experimental at best." Director Kim's expression remained stoic. "We know the conventional approach won't work. Their shields can likely withstand our standard nuclear weapons, but these modified missiles might penetrate those defenses, at least momentarily." He looked around the room. "Any objections?" Silence was his answer. "Launch," he ordered. Across Earth, silo doors slid open. Submarines surfaced briefly to release their payloads. The modified missiles streaked upward, seemingly primitive compared to the sleek alien craft they targeted. On the Imperial flagship, alarms suddenly blared. Admiral Choi turned from the surrender broadcast he was recording, irritation flashing across his features. "What now?" he demanded. "Primitive projectiles launched from multiple locations," his tactical officer reported dismissively. "Nuclear weapons. Engaging standard countermeasures." Admiral Choi barely acknowledged the report. Earth's nuclear arsenal had been thoroughly analyzed. Their most powerful weapons couldn't penetrate Imperial shields. He returned his attention to the surrender terms, already planning how quickly Earth could be integrated into the Empire's resource production network. The first modified missile struck the shield of a destroyer hovering over the Pacific. What should have been a harmless impact against superior technology instead created a cascading reaction. The destroyer's shields flickered, failed, and the nuclear warhead, its explosive power channeled and amplified by the alien components, detonated. Against the hull, the Imperial vessel didn't just take damage, it broke apart in a spectacular explosion that lit up the sky from Australia to Hawaii. Admiral Choi stared in disbelief as his command screen flooded with red alerts. More missiles were finding their targets, more Imperial ships were reporting shield failures. His flagship shuddered violently as an explosion rocked its hull. "Impossible," he whispered as damage reports flooded in from vessels around the planet. "They couldn't have adapted so quickly. Their technology is centuries behind ours." "Admiral," his second-in-command shouted. "3 destroyers lost. 5 more reporting critical damage. The humans, they've modified their weapons with components from our own technology," Admiral Choi finished, the reality dawning on him with cold clarity. General Yoon's warnings about the humans' adaptability suddenly seemed less like paranoia and more like prophecy. On Earth, Director Kim watched from the underground bunker as humanity's hastily prepared defenses bloodied the invaders. The aliens' perfect formation had broken apart as they scrambled to evade the modified missiles. Several of the massive ships were retreating to higher orbits, trailing debris and venting atmosphere into space. "It worked," Dr. Park whispered, her eyes wide with a mixture of horror and hope. Director Kim's expression remained grim. "For now, but we've only surprised them. They'll adapt." He turned to his communications officer. "Send the second wave, target their command vessels." Then, to his assembled staff, "Show them what happens when you corner a species that evolved as both predator and prey." As the second wave of missiles launched toward the disorganized alien fleet, Admiral Choi made a decision that no Imperial commander had made in 1,000 years of conquest. "Tactical retreat," he ordered, his voice tight with rage and humiliation. "Regroup beyond their weapons range." The Imperial warships that could still maneuver began pulling back, their perfect invasion formation now a chaotic scramble for safety. Earth had drawn first blood in a war that was supposed to have been a simple conquest, and the battle had only just begun. 3 months of fighting, and they still resist, Emperor Lee raged, his scaled fist smashing through the holographic display. Of Earth, the 3-dimensional image of the blue planet shattered into digital fragments that scattered across the war room floor before dissolving into nothingness. How is this possible? The Imperial War Council flinched collectively as another display panel cracked under the Emperor's fury. No one dared speak as Lee stalked around the circular table, his ceremonial armor clicking with each step. The room's lighting pulsed red, the Empire's color for military emergency, something not seen in the throne ship for over 300 years. Admiral Choi stood at rigid attention, the fresh cybernetic implant replacing his left arm still raw at the connection points. He had barely escaped when humans had somehow breached his flagship's command deck with their suicide drones. The humiliation of retreat burned in his 4 eyes. 57 vessels lost, the Emperor hissed, stopping directly in front of Admiral Choi. 12,000 Imperial warriors dead. 1/3 of our ground forces captured or missing. He leaned in close enough that Choi could smell the metallic tang of royal pheromones. "Explain this failure." Before the Admiral could respond, General Yoon stepped forward, data tablet in hand. Unlike many of the Council members who had observed the Earth campaign from orbit, Yoon had led ground forces personally in the Australian offensive. His armor still carried the scorch marks from human energy weapons, crude but effective modifications of Imperial technology. "Your Majesty, with respect, this was never going to be a standard conquest," Yoon said, his voice measured. "I've been studying human behavior extensively, and they're fundamentally different from our previous conquests." He activated a new holographic display showing human combat footage captured by Imperial drones. When most species face superior force, they calculate their losses and surrender when the equation becomes unfavorable. It's logical, predictable. Humans. He paused, searching for the right words. Humans calculate their losses and get angry. Their resistance actually intensifies after defeats. The display showed images of human fighters using captured Imperial weapons, modifying them in ways the Empire's engineers hadn't anticipated. Another sequence revealed human factories working day and night, retooling civilian production lines to create weapons. "They've achieved in 3 months what should have taken decades," Yoon continued. "They're adapting to our technology at unprecedented rates. The humans call it reverse engineering, and they excel at it." The Emperor's inner eyes narrowed. "You sound almost admiring, General. I respect capable adversaries, Your Majesty. It improves our strategy." Yoon switched the display to a global map. Most concerning is their unification. Before our arrival, humans were divided into nation-states, often in conflict. Our invasion has united them in ways their own history suggests should be impossible. Intelligence Officer Pak stepped forward, her whisker sensors twitching nervously. "There's another development, Your Majesty." She hesitated, clearly reluctant to deliver more bad news. "Speak," ordered the Emperor. "Our communication networks have detected unusual traffic from our occupied territories." She brought up a new display showing transmission patterns across the 17 star systems of the Empire. News of Earth's resistance has spread. The Barathi mining colonies have reported work slowdowns. The Nuvian agricultural worlds are seeing small but growing protests. The War Council murmured in concern. The Empire's strength came not just from its technology, but from the efficient extraction of resources from conquered worlds. Any disruption threatened the entire Imperial system. "Even more troubling," Officer Pak continued, "we've intercepted communications between human leaders and representatives from 7 subjugated species. They're sharing tactics, weaknesses in our systems." Emperor Li's outer eyes widened in shock, while his inner eyes narrowed in fury, a biological indication of extreme stress in his species. "Impossible. The translation barriers alone." "The humans solved that problem within weeks," Admiral Choi admitted bitterly. "They captured one of our universal translators in the first battle and replicated it. They've been broadcasting on our own communication channels ever since." The Emperor sank into his command chair, his claws digging into the armrests. On the main screen, live footage showed human fighters using modified Imperial hover tanks to assault an Empire stronghold in what had once been called Brazil. The Imperial defenders were in retreat, their superior weapons somehow jammed by human countermeasures. In orbit, the remaining Imperial fleet faced constant harassment from small, agile human craft that seemed to appear from nowhere, strike, and vanish before they could be tracked. The humans called them wasps, named after some stinging earth insect, and they had adapted Imperial phase-shifting technology to bypass shields entirely. "The conquest timeline must be adjusted," suggested a senior strategist. "Perhaps another year to achieve full planetary control." General Yoon shook his head. "The trend lines show we're losing ground weekly, not gaining it." He brought up a final display, a projection model showing Empire resources versus human adaptation rates. The lines crossed at a point 6 months in the future, suggesting a point where humans might achieve technological parity. "We should negotiate," General Yoon suggested carefully, bracing for the Emperor's reaction. "A diplomatic resolution could still preserve Imperial interests without further losses. The humans have resources we need. We have technologies they want. An alliance—" "Alliance?" Emperor Li rose from his chair, his voice dangerously quiet. "So with primitives who have caused this humiliation, with creatures who have inspired dissent among our subjects." His 4 eyes blazed with a cold fury that made even the veteran general step back. "No, we will not negotiate with these humans. We will crush them." He activated the command console, entering his royal authorization code. "Deploy the planet crackers. Target their largest population centers. When half their world burns, the survivors will submit." A heavy silence fell over the War Council. The planet crackers were the Empire's weapons of last resort, used only once before in their 1,000-year history, against a civilization that had nearly matched their technological level. Using such weapons against a pre-spaceflight species violated even the Empire's limited ethical protocols. "Your Majesty," Yoon said softly, "the humans have shown they can adapt our technology. If even one planet cracker falls into their hands intact, I've made my decision," the Emperor snapped, closing his inner eyes in the gesture that signaled absolute authority. "The attack commences in 12 hours. Dismissed." As the council members filed out, General Yoon lingered, studying the battle footage from Earth. The human fighters moved with a desperation and creativity he had never seen in centuries of warfare. They weren't just fighting for territory or resources. They were fighting for their very existence. And something told him that backing them into this final corner would not break their will. It would transform them into something the Empire had never faced before. The neutral meeting ground had been chosen carefully, an abandoned Imperial research station orbiting Earth's moon. Through the reinforced viewport, The blue-green planet hung in the blackness, its night side twinkling with city lights. Those lights were fewer now after 6 months of brutal war, but they still burned, a testament to humanity's refusal to surrender. Dr. Park Hannah stood before the Imperial delegation, her face showing the scars of battle. The left side of her jaw had been reconstructed after an Imperial energy weapon had caught her during the defense of Tokyo. Her right arm was now a blend of human engineering and reverse-engineered alien technology, one of the first human-made cybernetic limbs. Unlike the Imperial officers who wore their cybernetics as symbols of status, Dr. Park's enhancements were purely functional, born of necessity. Behind her stood Director Kim, his once grey hair now completely white. The weight of leading Earth's defense had aged him a decade in half a year. Flanking them were a dozen human military officers and scientists representing Earth's unified Defense Command. They had traveled to the meeting in a ship that would have been impossible 6 months ago, a human vessel utilizing adapted Imperial drive systems. Across the polished black table sat Emperor Li himself, his 4 eyes reflecting the cold light of the station. His ceremonial armor was notably absent, replaced by a simpler military uniform, the first sign that something fundamental had shifted in the Empire's approach. Admiral Choi sat at his right, his expression unreadable. General Yoon occupied the left position, watching the humans with careful interest rather than the contempt displayed by the other Imperial officers. "You should have heeded our warning," Dr. Park said simply, breaking the tense silence. "We didn't want this war." Emperor Li's outer eyes blinked slowly, while his inner pair remained fixed on her face. When he had ordered the planet crackers, deployed 6 weeks ago, he had expected swift submission. Instead, the humans had somehow detected the weapons before they reached firing position. In a daring space operation, human ships had rammed 3 of the 6 planet crackers, destroying themselves in the process, but preventing planetary bombardment. The other 3 had been disabled by a virus that human hackers had introduced into the Imperial command network, something previously thought impossible. The cost to Earth had been terrible, millions dead, great cities in ruins. But humanity remained unbroken. "Your species had no chance of victory," Emperor Li finally replied, his voice carrying less certainty than his words. "Why fight a war you couldn't win? It defies logic." Director Kim stepped forward. Despite standing before the ruler of 17 star systems, he showed no fear, only the steady resolve that had guided Earth through its darkest hours. "We weren't warning you about our weapons or technology," he said quietly. "We were warning you about human nature. We've spent our entire evolutionary history fighting, sometimes each other, sometimes our environment. When threatened, we don't calculate odds of success. We adapt, improvise, and keep fighting." He nodded to Dr. Park, who activated a holographic display between them. Unlike the earlier human holograms that had impressed the Empire with their crude functionality, this one was crystal clear, another adaptation of stolen technology. 3 months ago, we captured an Imperial courier vessel intact, Dr. Park explained. It contained the specifications for your faster-than-light communication network, the quantum entanglement system that links your empire together. The hologram showed a map of Imperial space, with hundreds of relay points connected by glowing lines. The Imperial officers shifted uncomfortably as they realized just how much the humans had learned about their systems. "Clever," Admiral Choi acknowledged grudgingly. "But understanding our network doesn't win you this war. Our remaining forces could still reduce Earth to ash, even at great cost to us." "We know," Director Kim said, his voice still calm, "which is why we haven't relied solely on defensive measures." Dr. Park expanded the hologram, revealing blinking red points at key junctions in the Imperial network. "These are quantum disruption devices, bombs essentially, that we've placed throughout your empire over the past 2 months." A murmur ran through the Imperial delegation. General Yoon leaned forward, his expression shifting from interest to alarm. "Impossible," he said. "You haven't had time to reach all these locations." Dr. Park's scarred face showed a hint of a smile. "We didn't have to. Remember those enslaved species you've been worried about? Turns out, when you oppress people for generations, they're eager to help someone who offers a chance at freedom, Director. Kim continued, "These bombs are linked to your faster-than-light network. If triggered, the resulting quantum cascade would collapse your entire Imperial communication system. Your fleet would be isolated, your supply lines severed. Each of your worlds would be cut off from the others." He let the implications hang in the air. An empire spanning 17 star systems could not function without instant communication. The carefully built structure of Imperial rule would disintegrate within weeks. Emperor Li stared at the display, his four eyes widening as understanding dawned. Earth hadn't just been fighting to survive, they'd been planning several moves ahead on the galactic chessboard. "You're bluffing," Admiral Choi said, but his voice lacked conviction. In response, Dr. Park pressed a single button on her control pad. One of the red points on the display flashed brighter, and then an actual transmission appeared, live footage from an Imperial colony world where a quantum disruption device had just disabled the local communication hub. The Imperial officials on screen were visibly panicking. "That was a demonstration," Director Kim said, "limited to a single outpost. The rest would trigger a cascading failure throughout your network." The room fell silent. Even Emperor Li seemed at a loss for words. General Yun finally broke the silence. "You could have triggered all the devices. Why didn't you?" "Because unlike you," Dr. Park replied, "we actually meant what we said in our warning. We don't want war. We never did. We just want to be left alone, or treated as equals if you wish to engage with us." Director Kim placed a data crystal on the table, another adapted piece of Imperial technology. "These are our terms for peace. They're fair. We keep our world. You keep your empire. We share technology and establish trade. No reparations demanded, despite your unprovoked attack." Emperor Li stared at the crystal, then at the humans standing before him. For the first time in his long rule, he faced a species that had not only resisted the Empire, but had brought it to the negotiation table as equals. "And if I refuse?" he asked, though the question seemed more curious than threatening now. "Director." Kim's expression remained calm. "Then we both lose. You might eventually destroy Earth, but your empire would collapse in the process, or—" He gestured toward the viewport, where Earth still hung, beautiful despite its wounds. "We can both win." 3 days later, representatives from both civilizations gathered to witness the signing of the Earth Imperial Peace Accord. The document, written in both human languages and Imperial script, established boundaries, rights, and, most importantly, recognized Earth as a sovereign power in galactic affairs. As Emperor Li pressed his seal into the document, completing the formal ceremony, he glanced at General Yun. "You were right about them," he admitted quietly. The general nodded. "Some warnings should be heeded, Your Majesty." On the human side of the chamber, Dr. Park and Director Kim watched as their world took its first official steps into a wider universe. The cost had been terrible, but humanity had survived, and more than survived, had earned its place among the stars, not through conquest, but through a determination that even an empire could not break. "Do you think they understand us now?" Dr. Park asked softly. Director Kim looked out at the stars beyond the station, no longer just distant lights, but places humanity would soon reach. "I think they're beginning to," he replied, "and that's enough for today." The end.